This is George McCaslin coming to you from my home at the Indian Meadows Nursing Center in Overland Park, Kansas. I'm the online national moderator for the Dad's House educational groups. I'm addressing you today concerning a major issue that will arise from the recent decision by the US Treasury Department to make it easier to take 100% of the money from any type of government check received by any persons who have child support arrears. This link will route you to an AP article on the decision. Now, with my being disabled and living in a nursing home, the suspicious side of me might conclude that this is an effort to reduce the excess population who are not contributing to society by being disabled or elderly and receiving Social Security benefits. I'm on Social Security disability, and to the best of my knowledge, I do not owe any child support arrears. However, I know what would happen if that were the case. Losing total access to my income would mean not being able to pay the Medicaid spend down, which takes about 95% of my SSDI. This would result in losing my Medicaid, as the arrears are not considered a legitimate expense. The nursing home would have to dump me into a hospital, which would be covered under Medicare, but only up to the limit of their days, which is about 100 days. From there, I would have no idea where I would go. By taking away our only source of income, this may lead those of us who are a part of the excess population to consider suicide as the only answer. Of course, this would benefit society by reducing the strain on Social Security and getting many off Medicare and Medicaid. This would be something politicians of both parties could brag about in addressing the current problems of funding Social Security. In this regard, just this week I heard from an Arizona paralegal about a 66-year-old father who has been informed that he will be losing his funds due to missing one of his child support payments from 1992. New York is charging him for that missed payment of $86 plus 20 years of accumulated interest penalty. He will be losing over 6 months of his Social Security retirement. Now, that said, the more logical side of me sees this simply as a major problem not only for those with arrears, but also for me, as I could lose access to my money as a result, even though I do not owe any. How do you wonder? Because the action the states will be allowed to take is to freeze and drain the accounts where the money is being electronically deposited. For those of us in nursing homes, the designated payee is the home itself, so the money is deposited into a central patient account. After deducting our spend-down amounts, we are given an allowance of $50 to $62 a month, depending on the state we live in, for personal expenses and necessities, such as phone, clothing, shoes, and glasses. If that account is frozen due to one resident owing arrears, we could all lose out. As for the problem of child support arrears, yes, there are those who refuse to pay their child support, but studies show that they account for less than 7% of all child support payers. The vast majority of problems with arrears simply come down to not knowing how the system works, resulting in requests for a modification not being immediately submitted after an involuntary loss of income. Often, by the time it is addressed, arrears and interest penalties have already begun to accumulate. Efforts need to be taken to not only stop these actions by the Treasury Department, but also in doing more to prevent obligors from developing unnecessary arrears. On this, I should put forth one point about what is reported as child support arrears is not all unpaid child support. As noted in this report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the largest portion of arrears is just interest penalty. A family court judge who did see both sides of the problem promoted this study. His name was Judge David Gray Ross, former commissioner of the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement. He was a man who did not just follow what was politically correct. He believed the government should treat everyone equally, including the enforcement of access rights. He issued opinions on the belief that adding interest penalties would create great harm to those trying to maintain their child support payments. Another source of arrears are those who were charged with tens of thousands of dollars in retroactive child support for a child they never knew existed. They did not have the money or the legal know-how of a Texas family court judge who last year was ordered to pay $185,000 in retroactive child support. He had the money and legal experience to appeal the decision and get it overturned, though the mother is still pressing it to an even higher court, so he may still lose. If he does, he will still be paying when he retires. We need to hammer on our members of Congress and the Senate with letters that this decision can't be allowed to stand. These people on Social Security with arrears are more victims of the system than they are deadbeats. Instead, they should be looking at why the individuals went into arrears and those with legitimate reasons to have the amount wiped away to give them a fresh start. Further, it should be mandatory that the states provide all persons ordered to pay, as well as those receiving child support, to be given the Federal Child Support Enforcement Handbook, which explains to each their rights. This handbook has been free for decades from the former Federal Citizens Information Center, now called the publicationsusa.gov. See this link for the section for non-custodial parents. There should also be a public service announcements printed in newspapers, heard in radio, and seen on TV. These will inform child support obligors that they have a right to immediate help from the state to modify the child support orders in the event of an involuntary loss of income. Their first stop after being laid off needs to be the local office of child support enforcement to make an official request to modify the order. When there is a large job layoff, there should be long lines at the child support enforcement office. Here's an article on writing legislators. You will note it is actually better in our age of email to send a snail mail letter, as it is more likely to get noticed as compared to emails, of which they get hundreds if not thousands a day. If you can keep it to just a few paragraphs, you might consider using one of these postcard designs. Simply type in your letter and the address, then print them out using cardstock on an inkjet printer. This reroute link will take you to the government listing for the U.S. senators, whose web address is too long to display here. This will take you to the one for Congress. They have a decent link to the address. Get to work on this right away, and please consider copying the text of your letter to comments at this link for other members to read. Thank you for your dedication to the work of Dad's House Educational Group, and remember always that through knowledge there is power, and through the power of knowledge we have rights and freedom.